Welcome back to another episode of the Startup Therapy Podcast. This is Ryan Rutan, joined as always by my friend, the founder and CEO of startups.com, Wil Schroter. Will, we're back, and it has been a long minute. We normally push pause in December, but we took an extra couple of snow days in January, and we're finally back. It feels
Yeah, we
good.
are. Man, it's been like almost 2 months. I was getting set
It,
up for this call and I was like, "What's everything I need to do?" I kind of forgot about all this.
I've
It
grown and shorn two beards since the last time we played this game. And how apropos that we're going to talk about today is that we've optimized efficiency into our workflows and we've optimized things like human connection and talking to
Uh-huh,
other people
uh-huh.
right out of it. You know, we got faster, but I think we also got lonelier. And I'd love to make today about exploring how that happened, but then also about how do we buy some humanity back on purpose at this point?
When we were putting this article together, for this podcast, I was thinking to myself, we've been talking about remote work and, kind of like that AI marketplace, and we are big proponents of it.
100%.
We're also reasonable people, and
Yeah.
and we're looking at it and we're saying, "Huh." And again, having been off for 2 months, right? Again, we were off in December, we were off in January, and I was like, I don't even have the tools that when you and I podcast, right? I get
Yeah.
to see you and talk to you or whatever, and obviously talk to you
Yep.
throughout the week, but it's one of the few times in the week that you and I spend, next to an hour together doing our thing. But that's it, right? I don't podcast with anybody else. I don't see the rest
Right.
of our team
That's exactly it,
whatsoever,
right?
right?
Yep.
Other than a couple Zoom calls.
This is
And
our social time.
yeah, and I think it's been years now since COVID. It's been like 5 years since, the start of COVID.
Yeah.
And I think the novelty of being able to come downstairs in your pajamas and work is still great. But the part that comes with not talking to anybody else, seeing a human presence that's not your family
Yeah,
for like days, weeks on end, is starting to get gnarly. And I think
it is.
what's triggered it more for me is the amount of time that I'm spending with AI, which is now taking human interaction totally off the table. Dude, this is getting a little scary. Like, this is not a good thing. How are you seeing it?
A lot of time spent chatting with not a person, but
Correct.
kinda sorta feels like it at times, right? Do you remember when you noticed, in the name of productivity, you had started subtracting people from your day? Do you remember, there a point at which it was the balance kinda tipped and you're like, "Oh, shit, this is actually happening."
Yeah, it's actually pre-COVID. It's actually when we were
Uh-huh.
all back in the office, okay? When we all moved to Slack as our primary, chat communications tool.
Yeah.
Our office used to be so
Yeah.
goddamn loud because it was a completely
Yep.
open office, and so, like,
Yeah.
to chat with somebody, you had to chat with them, you literally had to talk to them. And then within, call it 6 months of moving to Slack, our communication was faster, like, you could talk to a whole bunch of
Yes.
people at the same time, but our office was like a library, right? You'd have no idea that all these people work there because other than, like, a quick, giggle over, like, a meme or something like that,
Right.
there wasn't a single word, and I was like, "Hmm, this doesn't
Hmm.
feel right."
I remember a very specific moment at which I realized that we had turned the corner on something kinda weird. You remember our desks when we went to the open plan, our desks sat right beside each other. We had a little
Yep,
column between us, but we could literally reach out and touch each other.
yep.
Somebody walked up to my desk at one point and was like, "Hey, do you have a couple minutes?" And I had been sitting there silently for, 15 or 20 minutes, I'm sure. I don't remember. They sat directly
Yes,
across, so they were
yes.
they were staring at me and finally came over and said, "Hey, do you have a couple minutes?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm talking to Will." And I remember them they looked at you, they looked back at me, and they're like, Huh?"
Right,
I was like,
right.
"Oh, yeah, I sort of am and I'm not at the same time." And I remember that was the moment for me where I was like, "Okay, this is a little strange."
Hours on end and not utter a word. And again, that's just where it started. And dude, it's gotten way worse, right? Because
Way, way worse.
and now we're not in an office together. And again, we'll dig into this. I'm spending 4 to 5 to 6 solid hours per day
Yes.
talking to GPT or, whatever chat interface I'm using. So I'm not even talking to humans anymore.
Yeah.
Now, it is wildly effective. It is wildly productive. But when I get up out of my chair at the end of the day and I go talk to my wife about how the day went, I'm
Yeah.
like, huh, I don't have like a single funny story to tell you or a quip or anything else like that. There's one time GPT said, like nothing, right? And I got to imagine if it's wearing on me, it's definitely got to be wearing on a lot of other people who never had those connections to begin with.
Right. Yeah. So I think that one thing, maybe they don't notice it as strongly, but that doesn't make it any less dangerous, I don't think. Right. So I was thinking about this the other day, like all of the early stage solo founders out there who are just literally on their own, right? There isn't another teammate to talk to. What does that look like? Right. So on one hand, I guess you could say, well, at least there's something to talk to now, but I think it's a big challenge, and look, I have definitely talked about on the podcast even when we left the physical office environment, right? Specifically when I left, and it was before we were actually out of the office, but we were only in the office 2 days a week at that point. I left and went to Florida, and so I was physically out of the office. And one of the things that I noticed was, as a bit of an empathic introvert, being in an office meant overhearing lots of things and getting involved in lots of things and
Yeah.
starting to carry emotional weight and stuff for a lot of other people. And so there was this benefit to being outside. And I remember thinking at the time, I was like, man, I've optimized interruptions out of my and emotional baggage out of my calendar. That's awesome. I also optimized connections straight out of my life, which is you don't feel that. You feel the benefit immediately. I felt the
Right, right.
benefit near
I
the immediate. I
saw
was like, wow, I have so much more energy now. I'm not drugged down by all these other side convos and all this other stuff. And at some point you go, damn, those were actually pretty valuable, right? We've traded
right.
availability for true presence. I mean, we've traded messages, sometimes not even to people, for conversations, and we didn't really lose our teams, but we sort of quietly uninvited them,
Well,
right?
that's what I'm saying,
So
man. And so I think the core of what we're going to talk about today is like we've traded productivity for humanity, right? Or the other way around, I guess. We traded up our humanity for productivity, and it blows my mind because I kind of didn't see all of it happening at once, and now
right.
I'm starting to see it happen. And I guess what's interesting is I'm watching. I think we all are watching the floodgates about
Yeah,
to
yeah.
burst again with where AI is going, and I'm like, shit. Like, this is a problem. And again, you nailed it, Ryan. There's a lot of people that we help, other founders that don't have a team of people, right? Or here's an interesting one. You and I have a benefit that we've worked together for almost 15 years now, right? A
Yes.
very long time. And most of that time we were spent, physically in an office. You could build those relationships. And a lot of other members of our team, the same thing. We have very long histories with them.
Yes, yes.
And so I felt like we've had the benefit of having established those, interpersonal relationships and then kind of
For
carried
sure.
them into COVID and beyond. What if we had none of those? What if our whole team was all the people that we hired in the last year? It
Yeah.
would feel so disconnected.
I can't actually imagine what remote first, like if you really never had that connectivity, anybody on the team that you've ever met with
Mhm.
in person, and or maybe you have, but like you haven't spent significant time with them. Like we played hockey, we worked out, we had lunch, like we did all this stuff together as a team, and I think that made remote less painful. I just when
Correct.
you start with
Yeah.
remote, and I get that maybe that's it just feels normal at that point. I'm going to argue that it just isn't. It isn't normal, and that your work product is not going to be as good. It's like, yeah, I can ship a doc in half the time now, and I feel half as proud because nobody made it better with me, right? Like it's just me doing stuff now.
Let me challenge that a little bit. I think we're more productive. I think we get more shit done, right?
I think so.
Right?
Oh no, no, I'm not arguing that at all. I absolutely yes. We do things twice or more as fast than we used to.
Right, right.
100%.
But at the expense of this little thing called humanity, which by the
Yeah.
way, like in the past, like decades and decades, and centuries of building businesses, wasn't necessarily a thing people talked about because it wasn't an issue, right?
No, it was a foregone conclusion. It, it
Yeah.
was it was a
Like,
necessary part of the puzzle.
and so let's start to talk about how the hell we got here, right?
Sure.
Because I think it's important to talk about how every time we make a decision in a race for productivity, how humanity has the humanity factor that was never a factor before
Yeah.
has become not just a casualty, but maybe like it ain't coming back, And again, we'll talk about how to get it back, but like let's talk about how we got here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it is a casualty, and I think it could come back, but I don't necessarily know that it's a natural cycle. I think that this is one of those things where it will take a very deliberate action. Right? So let's talk about how we got here, right? We all started racing towards productivity and efficiency.
Hmm.
Slack replaced hallways, Zoom replaced rooms, AI replaced the urge to even ask somebody something,
And
right?
every
Holy
time
hell.
we high-fived the shit out of each other, right?
Yep.
When we did it, right? Like I love Slack, right? I absolutely love Slack. And I will say this, I love Slack as opposed to email. Like, the only time I get an email from anybody in the company now is when they quit. like,
Yep.
like email is the equivalent of a certified letter now, right?
Yeah,
Which
that's
nothing good
exactly it.
comes of, right? I never get a certified
Right.
letter that says we love you so much, mom and dad, right? Like,
Yeah.
so it's like the worst possible. And so I only get an email now, like I said, when something's horrible. That said, I hated email because it was slow. It was, and that was, people looked at
Yeah,
email
yeah.
being faster, right? I hated email. And Slack was like this perfect blend of when you just had a
Yep.
simple thing you needed to say to me, you could just say it and it didn't become an email thread, right?
Yeah.
And I loved it. I loved how all of a sudden I was talking to so many other people because the cost of that touch, so to speak, was so
Yeah, yeah.
low.
Transactional time nearly zero.
Exactly. But then all of a sudden, Ryan, who sits next to me 12 to 14 hours a day, he and I have an exchange. We've talked all day, so to speak. We've
Yes.
communicated all day, I should say,
Right.
but we haven't said a single word to each other. That's when could tell, and you're saying the same thing, that, okay, maybe that's worth making that trade. Okay, maybe,
Yeah.
maybe we're getting more done. So in name it, we missed the part where we lost our humanity because of it. And we had plenty of other ways to, like, we're at lunches and stuff like that. So we had plenty of other ways to, like, recapture that touch point, but we never got it back.
We didn't. That's it. That's it. We used to whiteboard together for hours. Now we used to whiteboard for 3.
Right.
Now I prompt for 6, right? And call that collaboration somehow. And I think one of the things where, like, there's an increase in individual productivity, but one of the things that I'm seeing more and more because of the amount of productivity we have, the amount of, let's say, content or collaboration or thinking that we can crank out, it makes it really hard to catch everybody else up. Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that, because we're not doing this together, right? It used to be that we'd whiteboard in a room together and everybody sort of had at least some overlap and shared context.
Yeah.
I'm finding it harder and harder because we've stripped the humanity out of this to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we do have enough of that shared context that we understand it, right? When
Right.
when you're not part of the genesis, simply looking at the final outcome and like, okay, this is the distillation of a whole bunch of thought and effort on my part and Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever.
Yeah.
When you're not part of that, you lose so much to me. There's so much texture lost. And I don't just mean that in terms of like just the human component, but actually understanding and making it something that's useful to someone other than you has become harder, in my opinion.
Let's continue this timeline. We go to remote work, and we did remote work long before it was cool to do remote work, right? Like,
Yes.
like 15 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Work from home Wednesdays.
Yeah, correct, right? And it worked great because we were mostly interacting with each other. But I think you might have moved by the time we got to the point where work from home Wednesdays became work from home Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
We were already there.
Okay, okay,
Yep.
got it.
We were already there. So we were only in the office 2 days a week.
Right. And at that point, I could already feel it. Right. I could already,
Yep.
like, I could already feel something missing. Also, for what it's worth, back then, because remote work wasn't like a thing people were used to, it
Yeah.
was more tantamount to days off.
Yeah.
It wasn't as much, it was remote work sort of, right? It was because office still, like, was tantamount to work, right?
Yeah.
Not office was tantamount to I'll do some work, right? And so I also saw, like, on our Fridays, like, our Fridays almost disappeared. We didn't increase productivity. That was just people not they just had a 3-day weekend. My point is, at least back then, we still had a touch point of humanity, right? We were still seeing each other, etc. Not soon thereafter, COVID hits, and COVID
Yeah.
force feeds everybody into remote work. And at first, I really liked it. I'm going to be honest. I loved not having to go to work. Let me put it this way. Even after everything we're going to say today, if you said tomorrow that in order to keep doing my job at startups.com, I would have to go back to an office, I would quit my job at startups.com. That's how much I don't ever want to go
Yep.
back to an office, right? This isn't me making a turn from all of that we've said before and saying, I really want to go back to an office.
Yeah, we're not about to send everybody an email that says you got to come back to an office,
Yeah,
guys. So
there's
for any of the team that's listening, don't be scared.
I
You're safe.
guarantee there is no return to work mandate coming from this company. Anyway, but in the first year, I think because COVID was was such an overlapping specter, right? You couldn't go anywhere,
Yeah,
right? So, like, it felt like a sick day, except it lasted like 2 years.
forever. Yeah.
Right, right. So again, now we're all hopping on Zoom, right? And Zoom becomes the thing. And at first, it's new, it's novel, like, hey, you could see everybody, talk to everybody, etc.
Yep.
In the not too distant future, it will wind up becoming the default. Like, that's how you interact with people at a quote personal level. And then I started to see it because we were using it so much that Zoom, it was better than nothing. It was better than, the Slack interaction we had,
Sure.
but it was hard to persist. Like, nobody wanted to be on a Zoom for hours and hours on end.
Oh yeah. Zoom fatigue was a very real thing.
Correct, right? And at some point it became a liability, right?
Yeah.
It was like there's something about being stuck on camera that drains you, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the phone is kind of the same thing, but dude, I can be on Slack 14 hours a day. I don't even think about it.
So there was actually some super interesting research around this that said that being on a phone would actually be significantly easier for people because one of the things that we do when we can visually engage sort of with a person,
Yeah.
we're built to look for all these additional nonverbal cues
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and body language, all these things that when you have these little boxes instead of actual people in a room, or you can't see the entire body, our body, we are mentally, we're still looking for this stuff and we can't find it. And so
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
actually a huge part of where the Zoom fatigue came from. Some really fascinating research.
Around this time, and I think this is important to the folks listening, we had launched our founder groups product. That was in our ability to be able to get 8 people in a room and talk about stuff we were dealing with, right?
Remember in 2019 when that was going to be an in-person product?
I mean, god damn, man. Like,
COVID was like, rethink that one.
the launch date for that product for a national launch in every city was, I remember this specifically, March of 2021.
Yes. Yep.
Like
Nope.
the worst outside.
Not happening.
So we moved it to Zoom, and the idea was we'll be able to have the same interactions, but we'll do it over Zoom. And it never materialized. Everybody tried it. Everybody tried it, right? And it worked zero. It turns out that the in-person aspect of it is so much different. Like, the texture of it is so much different, right?
Yes.
So we got through COVID, and all of a sudden remote work became like tried and tested, right? And again, I'm a huge fan of remote work. So
Same.
this isn't me
Yep.
making an argument against it. What I am going to say is we once again chipped away at our humanity.
100%. We removed friction, but we also accidentally removed quite a bit of meaning and interaction at the same time.
But I'll say this, but at least we were still interacting with each other.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
which brings us to the final straw. GPT shows up, and I'm using GPT
Yep.
universally to mean all chatbots or AI in general. And all of a sudden, we're all enamored by it, right? We all jump on it. We're solving problems with it. We're doing cool stuff with it, whatever. And all of a sudden, I look up and I realize I've been on GPT for 5 straight hours at the
Yep.
expense of talking to a single human.
Yep.
Now, dude, I am wildly productive on this thing, right? I've never been more productive at the expense of
Yes.
any level of humanity. And I'm looking down the barrel of this gun, man, and I'm like, this is not going to get better. It's terrifying.
Let me level up on that for a second because I found myself a couple weeks ago having built out a bunch of automations and using multi-model chat. I was watching some chat bots talk to each other for like 3 hours. I wasn't even participating. I set it up and I hit run,
Yep.
and then I literally sat and it's like I was watching CNN or no, so it's C-SPAN. I was just watching stuff play out, right? I was just watching people have conversations,
Yeah,
like,
man.
and then I stopped and I'm like, what is happening, right? Like I'm now no longer looking out and imagining dystopia. I'm literally sitting in it.
Right. And so again, I get up at the crack of dawn, right? You and I talk, we're on very different
Oh
time
yes.
zones. What are we, 6 hours apart?
Yep.
And so if I'm up at 4 or 5 a.m., like today, and I'm pinging you, what time would it be? It's
Yeah, 10. We usually pop on between 10 and 11 my time.
right. And you and I have great chats in the morning. It's kind of like
Yep.
before everybody else wakes up, it's great.
Yes.
And I realize that's becoming more and more the last time we talk. I mean, like on a consistent basis,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot of dialogue at that point, right? Like if you look at our Slacks, there's probably 100 to 200 messages in that period.
Yep.
And then the rest of the day maybe has 20.
Bro, we're right back where we started. We're sitting next to each other without
Yep.
communicating a single word. In this case, because
Yeah.
all of that extra dialogue has now been consumed by GPT, right? I'm
Yeah.
having endless conversations with GPT. Again, if you look back at those timestamps, when you get past the wee hours of the morning, all my timestamps are in GPT. And I've got so
Yep.
many parallel conversations going. There's no way I could do anywhere near the level of what I'm doing. And I know you're the same with a human. And
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. My productivity is
Yeah.
phenomenal, right? But I no longer
But
talk to humans when I'm doing
yeah.
that, right? And I don't have a cooler way to say it. That is wildly terrifying. That is wildly terrifying.
It's a cost we didn't model for at all, right? We,
But it's
we
new.
understood. I guess, look, speed and productivity had a price tag. What we didn't look at was that the invoice line reads isolation, right? So, like, that's where we're at now. And I think we look at some of the things that I would have even considered inefficient before, and just sort of things that I was happy to have go away. Like all those little side interactions that I felt were just weighing me down and wearing me out. And man, laughter was never an inefficiency. Not that I ever was against laughter, but like it was a glue. I didn't account for what it was. Right. Yes, there were times we interrupted, or like, yes, sometimes we interrupted people's work with things like our NBA Jam cabinet, playing that thing at 4:30 instead of 5:30. And it did feel like an interruption to work. But man, it was part of the fabric. It was super important.
You know, something that's really funny about everything we talk about here is that none of it is new. Everything you're dealing with right now has been done 1,000 times before you, which means the answer already exists, you may just not know it, but that's okay. That's kind of what we're here to do. We talk about this stuff on the show, but we actually solve these problems all day long at groups.startups.com. So if any of this sounds familiar, stop guessing about what to do. Let us just give you the answers to the test and be done with it.
Once I got into GPT, a lot of what I'm doing now is I'm saying to myself, well, if I can get this resolved in GPT, then I don't have to bother one of my coworkers.
Yes.
Our CTO posted something in Slack a couple hours ago and said, here's a new version of Vercel, how it's going to normalize, like how it communicates to other AIs. And I had a question for him about like how is that different than what we've been doing in that platform before? And
Yeah.
I was like, well, if I ask him, then I'm going to be taking up time that he could otherwise,
Yep.
be writing code. So I'm going to take it to GPT, where I can also feel less stupid
It's that,
and do there, right?
right? It's
And I
that.
thought
And
about it.
just
This
go
is
ask
2
without
hours
any
ago, man.
judgment.
Right? And I
Yeah.
thought about it and I'm like, okay, maybe he didn't want to answer that question for me, right? Or maybe conversely, maybe he wanted to talk about it.
Maybe he
Maybe that's why he
did.
posted it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Maybe he'd rather you have his answer so that he also knows you have an answer to
Yep.
that. This is one of the things, like, we're all absorbing information and generating stuff so fast that it's hard to keep up with what anyone else is doing and what they know and what they don't.
Yep.
And it's creating some real danger, in my opinion, man. Like, used
Yeah.
to be, you said it now, like, you'll just go GPT it yourself, but like, used to be that the retort, right? Let me Google that for you.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Now
Yeah.
it's like, let me go chat GPT that for you, because at this point, what can't you go and find out at least a reasonable answer for? And the answer is
Absolutely.
damn
Yeah.
near nothing.
An 80% answer at least.
Yep.
Right. And I thought about that and I'm like, shit, that's yet another thing that's going to cause me to not have an interaction with him. Right.
Yeah.
And again, I say this kind of facetiously. Maybe that's the best thing he's ever heard. Maybe he wants to hear less of me. And I could accept that. But, we're going back to this cost we didn't model for. Dude, I'm starting to get a little anxious about this because I'm thinking
Yeah.
of how many things, let me reverse it, that he's not asking me, right?
Yeah.
That I do want to talk to him. I do want those questions brought to me, right?
Yep.
And I'm like, shit, think about this. If I have a dumb question, okay, it at least invokes some dialogue, right? Which can also
Yeah.
also lead to other things. Honestly, it often does. But if I'm a 25-year-old person in an organization and I'm now afraid to ask questions because I can just GPT it and kind of be
Yes.
quiet about it, think of how much interaction the hires up aren't getting with me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
A teaching moment. I'll give you an
Right.
example. A person you and I both know who I've been working with on my house, right? Convincing
Uh-huh.
him to start a business, right? And every time we get together, he's telling me like basically he's running the whole thing through GPT, like all of
Sure.
his decision trees and everything else like that,
Yep.
which I can't knock. But he'll come to me and he'll explain to me like what the outcome of that conversation was. And I'm like, damn, dude, that's like entirely wrong. Right. Like
Yeah.
you were completely led astray by a
Yeah.
wildly overzealous AI that sounded
Yes.
convincing as hell. But none of that is true. You know what it reminds me of?
Yep.
It reminds me of when college students used to come to us and say, this is what my
Yes.
professor said. And
Uh-huh.
I'm like, that is
Yeah.
entirely wrong, told to you by a very well-meaning person.
Yeah.
Right?
Well intended, but they haven't left the classroom long enough to remember what it's like to
They've
build a
never
business
actually
if they
done
ever knew
this.
in the first place. Yeah.
So that's here to there. But again, this behavior, right, of me going to a non-human for stuff
Yeah.
is robbing us of interactions.
Yep.
But here's the trick. But it makes so much more sense for me to do that. It makes so much more sense for me to go to GPT and ask the question. And I'm starting to go, well, it also makes sense for the rest of my team to go to GPT to ask the question, which means I'm not getting involved, which means I don't
Yeah.
have either a teaching moment or a say in the matter or anything else like
Yep.
that. And I'm like, oh, shit, that's a problem.
Yeah. You know, there was a little of a parallel I thought of here, which is that like, and look, I'm not judging anybody's parenting style, but like we've been fairly device restrictive.
Yeah.
And I remember like being out with our kids and like our kids be a little noisier. We'd have to do a little more work to get them to settle in and eat dinner. We're out somewhere, look across, and there's a family of five where the kids are being perfectly quiet because each one of them's looking into a device on the table. Like, that
100%.
was
Yep.
easier,
Yep.
really efficient, right? And it keeps but it does the same kind of things, right? Strips out that humanity, strips out those interactions. And I think it's dangerous. There's something else too, and I think we've talked about this on another podcast episode, Will, but there's a big difference between you and I using GPT to work through things that we're already outright experts and just really experienced people in.
Yeah.
Right. And the 22, 23, 24-year-old just getting an answer from it. They have nothing to qualify it against. And I
Yep.
really worry that we're going to lose something really important. And I was thinking about a really specific example where you get to some level of conviction. I think
Mhm.
that one of the things that these outcomes can lack as you're getting information back from a model is conviction. I remember one of the best lines I ever wrote. It ended up being our highest performing ROAS line from a LinkedIn ad ever. Happened over by our lunch table. Remember the lunch table? We had the massive whiteboard next to it
Yeah. Yeah.
in at the end of the room there, conference table, but it wasn't in the conference room. It was one just
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
end by the entrance. And I wrote a couple lines up on that board, and then I was asking people to bring their laptops over and just like, hey, I want you guys to scroll your LinkedIn feed and tell me what you're seeing. And everybody started kind of going, oh, okay, like we came to this conclusion together
Right.
that there was a lot of polished business graphics and a lot of really formal talk and all this stuff. And so we decided to do it's the napkin ad, right?
Yeah.
That's where that
Yeah.
came from.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that came from other people rolling their eyes at it, beating it up a little bit, pushing around, and then all of us, everybody kind of going, okay, I see where this is going. The conviction that came from that was something really interesting. That had I gotten the same answer from a model, it was like, do this for these reasons, it wouldn't have felt the same, right? And so I think that there is something else to that human piece that even if the information was exactly the same,
Yeah.
the way we receive it, the way we process, the way we feel about it can be entirely different.
Yep.
And to your point, like, I miss having those moments with people. I miss, like, yes, I want my team to know things. On occasion, I also want it to come from me because that binds us, that brings us together in a different way. If they come to the same conclusion without me, they came to that conclusion without me, right? And
I think
that's
part of
less
that,
of a
Ryan,
team and just more of a bunch of mercenaries.
is what teachers used to retort when people said, "Why do I need to learn this? I've got a calculator." Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, this will give me the answer. So why do I need to
Yes.
know the math behind it?
Yep.
And
Yep.
you know, the teacher, and usually fatally, would explain because the math behind it is how you understand what the answer is supposed to be.
Yes.
Right? Just getting the answer isn't what it is. It reminds me of too what I would imagine professors, college professors, or any teacher would be trying to tell their students fatally right now, which is, I understand that all of you can go into GPT and write a book report, right? Or a
Yeah.
term paper or whatever. I
Right.
understand
Right.
you can just use a calculator, right? But understand the whole point of you being here wasn't to get the output, it was to get the input, right? So you understood the material, right? I look at it with our team where this goes back to, you know, when we'll talk about this, kind of bringing back the humanity. I'm going to have to start realizing that yes, our team can GPT it, Google it kind of thing, right? But it's my job to make it so they don't have to. It's my
Yeah.
job to be able to say, let me explain my thought process, or let me explain kind
Right.
of, you know, how we get here so that you understand the math behind the answer. This is the first time I've ever had to do that. It's weird, but it's real, man.
It is. So this is where we are, right? We find ourselves at a crossroads,
Yeah.
or maybe we're already past a little bit. We need to talk about how do we reverse things a bit. So how do we bring humanity back, right? Like, what is it? How do we add human ROI back to the roadmap in like a really, really deliberate way?
I think the first thing is, to be honest, realizing that like we got a problem.
Yeah,
It
for
was
sure.
a little bit different when we all went remote work, and it was like, oh yeah, just put people in an offsite, or like put people like, you know, work at a co-working facility or something.
Yeah, yeah,
And we could look at it like, well, problem, no people in office, or, right? You know, people out of office, solution, people in office, right? Like that was the
yeah.
thing. And you're seeing kind of that caveman response, like at huge companies now, right? And these are people that I absolutely like admire, like Jamie Dimon from Chase, right? Incredible, incredible mind. And his whole thing is like, hey, we're all going back to the office because we get more stuff done. Do I think that's the answer? No. Do I think that guy's a
Yeah.
genius? Yes. I say this to say, certainly people are taking that caveman approach, right? No office bad, office good.
Yeah.
I get it. But what I'm saying is that was the easy version of this. We're now
Right.
doing a version where there's no human at all.
Even if you're in an office, right? Because we've already proven that you can sit right next to somebody and talk to them without letting a word pass or any actual human interaction occur.
You bet. And I think now that really because AI is the final step in this, where you're just taking humans out of it altogether, I think we have to start going, dude, like this isn't okay. Like as managers, Ryan, this is a whole new skill set. Again,
Yeah.
it goes back to I don't need to teach math anymore because everybody's got calculators. And you've got to be of the mindset that just getting the answer isn't what I'm here for. Like I also
Right.
need to teach people how we arrived there. So let's say that we're thinking about a new product we're going to build. I can brainstorm with GPT all day long and have no input from everybody and produce a requirements document. And that's cool. Like that was the most time efficient way I could get that done. But what did I lose in that process? I lost the buy-in of everybody that would have been involved.
Yep.
Right. I lost somebody raising their hand and say, hey, that's a stupid idea. Like the challenge, right? The pushback. Obviously, most AIs are incredibly sycophantic.
Which to me, like that goes back to what I was saying before about conviction, right? That's part of where conviction comes from. It's not just people agreeing, it's people disagreeing and then realizing why you still think you're right, right? That's where conviction comes from. And it's an important part of the thought process that absolutely doesn't occur any of my chat interactions with GPT or otherwise.
Okay, so I'm going to actually use that as a great comparison. So you fly into town, Ed flies in, or you come from Spain, Ed comes from Canada,
Yep.
like in the team in Columbus, everybody gets together, right? And we sit in my living room and we go over the product development together.
Yeah.
Right? Over a course of a few days, right? And how pumped were we coming out of that, right?
Yep.
No way on God's green earth that was ever going to happen in a Slack chat. Ever.
32 pages
ever,
of
right?
product discussion generated by ChatGPT. Enjoy. Like, oh, I can't wait.
Because, and again, that was like a really compressed period of time. You guys were only in town for so long. We had a lot to cover.
Yep.
Unfortunately, we just motored through it. But, we really came up with an entire vision and step forward for the company that everybody contributed to, everybody was bought in, and more importantly, everybody's excited about. Again.
Yeah. Buy-in and ownership, you can't. If you're just reading a requirements doc that was generated and handed to you, like there's no buy-in, there's no ownership, there's no sense of participation.
Right.
It's just executional work at that point. It becomes transactional.
So
then guess what they're going to do? The obvious thing to do would be, all right, let me have GPT go execute this for me. Perfect.
So, but other aspects of that, this concept of not having the interactions, realizing the interactions are a fundamental aspect of our humanity, the efficiency that we gain has a real cost that as managers, as leaders of companies, we have to replace.
For sure.
Right. And maybe some of that replacement is I use AI where appropriate, but I also realize that at some point, the use of AI is going to cost me all the buy-in from my team.
Yeah.
Right. Or from your standpoint as the CMO, you can say, I know I can put together this entire plan by myself in AI.
Yep.
But without anybody else chiming in on it, one, I could be wrong, like we've been talking about.
Yes.
Right. I could have missed something, or gotten like really, high on my own supply about this concept without considering a really basic fact. Or because you don't have buy-in on it, all the other like levers that you need in order to orchestrate this are being put in front of people who don't care about it. Right. Like kind of matters. Or when you have the buy-in, you have shared like consequence. If your campaign doesn't work and everybody bought in on it, they're like, shit. But if you're the only one that presented it and no one else had any input and you fuck it up, that's just Ryan's problem.
That's just
right?
it.
I mean, technically all of our problems, but like, you know what I mean? It ain't the same.
Yeah. And what's funny is like we're mostly talking about fairly transactional stuff like content, producing things, campaigns, whatever. You get into things like some of the softer stuff, which are the hardest, right? So
like what?
the really hard calls in a founder, like I don't having to let somebody go, having to wind down the company, right? Should we take on investment? There's all of these other things that are
Yep.
like these really big, tough, hard decisions that founders have to make. And look, the hardest calls are always still going to be ours, but man, it feels like they land a little softer when someone else hears it land, right? Like
Agree.
when it's just ours. And also like I get really worried that we're losing the ability to thought process.
Mhm.
Right. We're losing the ability to kind of sit with stuff because we don't have to. Right. We don't have to sit with anything anymore. I can immediately have something process it. Right. There's no more like, it's funny. I have done this. I used to have a notebook beside the bed. Right. And when I would wake up with one of those thoughts that just wouldn't go away,
Yeah.
I'd write it down and then I'd leave it until the next morning, try to get it out of my head. What do I do now? Throw that shit into GPT.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Partially just as a way to capture it, but
I agree.
partially as a way to begin to process it, right?
Yep.
Which takes away just sitting with something. And I think
Yep.
there's a real danger in that. Yes, there are certain things that it'll help me crank stuff out. I can help me brainstorm, help me do a lot of things. But I think when we get into some of these bigger, harder decisions, which are the best and worst part of being a founder, there's a much, much bigger danger.
That's where my head is at, right? I keep thinking to myself, how do I replace the humanity in this, right?
Yeah.
How do I replace the process that brought the humanity? Because this thing's scary, right? Again,
Yeah.
my efficiency is at an all-time high in over 30 years of being a founder. And this is the first time I've ever seen a consequence to efficiency, right? In the past, it was always efficiency good, consequence zero, pretty much,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Consequence was maybe the cost of the tool, right?
Correct.
That would create that efficiency. And
Yep.
now I'm kind of like, damn, I could do all of this in a vacuum. In my connection to my team becomes zero. And I've been talking about how it affects the team. Let me talk about how it affects me, right? Like how it
Sure.
affects me personally. When you go hours and hours and hours, and like if we extrapolate days and days and days without really ever having conversations, like any meaningful conversations with anybody, that stuff messes with your head.
It does.
And I say this, we have a lot of luxuries because of the stage of this company that most founders don't have. We have the luxury of being around almost 15 years, a tremendous amount of personal history among the team, and
Yeah.
trust, et cetera. And so I don't have to build those things because we already built them. But if I'm a solo founder and I've got maybe two people that were working with me through Upwork or something, right? Super
Yeah,
far
yeah.
away that I've never met, I was already lonely, right? But this is taking it to the nth degree. I think as a founder, which again is a very, and it's not like specific to the founder, it's specific to everybody on the team, but I'm just going to speak from the founder's perspective. As a founder, it's already a lonely job, like a super
Yes.
lonely job to begin with. And now to take the human interaction out of it altogether, that is just not healthy. That I don't see any version where that goes well. I don't see any version where people are like wildly happy about it, unless you are the
It
world's
was
most
already
power
isolating,
introvert.
as you said, right? It was already
Yeah.
isolating, and we kept the isolation, but we deleted the antidote,
Yep.
which were the other people that we would have been forced to communicate with.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we're dialing that up significantly. Ironically, at a time in the world where it's never been easier, right? Access is not the problem, right? We can
Yeah,
find
yeah.
people that would be really worth talking to.
Yep.
And yet we have all these reasons why it'd just be more efficient not to.
I'm of the opinion right now that we're going to see a massive swing the other direction, almost by nature, where all of us, and I'm not specific to like startups or anything else like that, all of us are going to start to place a massive premium on human interaction, right? I feel like this is, one guy's prediction, but I feel like the world is starting to like knot up like a muscle, right?
Yep.
And it's starting to hurt. I think social media, for as much as it was supposed to connect us, disconnected us in a tremendous way, right? Because it replaced that human interaction, which we
Yes.
thought, like, if I have lots and lots of convos with all of my friends, technically we're talking. But if none of those wind up being like actual human interactions, it's not the same thing. And I
No,
think at
they're
some
not.
point, I also get numb to it, which is even worse.
Like again, and this is you and I coming from perspective of having lived a very different version of life. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't have a cell phone until I was in my 20s,
How
right?
did you
And
make
that
it?
was just a phone that you had to push the keys. You had to remember the number, push the buttons to call someone, and then you could only hear their voice, right? Like I think about the poor digital natives, and it's
Yeah.
like They don't even necessarily know what they've lost, and I think that brings a greater responsibility on those of us who do, to protect the humanity in all of
Yeah.
this, because
Yeah.
we may be the only ones who actually really truly still understand what it was worth.
I agree. And here's what I think. I think, Ryan, startups of the future, right? We're all building kind of these next generation of startups. I think one of our greatest like cultural draws is going to be how we exemplify humanity, human connection, right? And again, I don't just mean in person.
I hope so. Because I
Well,
feel like that's always been one of the tenets of a startup, right? Think of the way we described it, the large soulless corporation, right?
Yeah.
Like, and that's becoming true. Like, the worst thing in the world to me would be that description also applies to a 2-person startup
we're
company.
very
Like,
small, soulless corporation.
yes, very small, soulless individual. Yeah. Awful.
I genuinely believe that. And this applies to our own company, et cetera. I think our ability to craft a new culture that triples down on humanity, that recognizes that all of these productivity boosts that we've had have come at a tremendous cost, and that the people that work for us, with us, et cetera, are lonely as hell, right? Just
Yes.
at a
100%.
very fundamental level. And our ability to engage and bring them back in, make them feel heard, make them feel connected, make them feel important again, right? And I don't just mean on an ego level, I mean just at a human level.
Sure. Yep.
Especially for what we're about to go through, right? With what AI is about to do, I think is going to be the number one premium. I think people are like, yeah, there's lots of jobs I can get if jobs still exist. There's lots of jobs I can get, but I'm looking for a company with soul. I'm looking for a company that values humanity in a way that kind of got pulled away. And I think for all of us, as startups, as founders, as people, if we can start to recapture that humanity, we're going to be the kind of startup that all of us actually want to go and work for in a world where none of that exists.
Overthinking your startup because you're going it alone? You don't have to, and honestly, you shouldn't, because instead, you can learn directly from peers who've been in your shoes. Connect with bootstrapped founders and the advisors helping them win in the Startups.com community. Check out the Startups.com community at www.startups.com to see if it's for you. Could be just the thing you need. I hope to see you inside.